Hey everybody, in this video we're going to be talking about SharePoint lists and specifically what are the top 10 things that you can do to improve the user experience within your lists. Now this video I'm intending it to be very practical in that I have a list of 10 things. You don't have to use them all, but there's 80% of the things in this list you could do today right now, and it should improve the usability of your lists. So I come across a hell of a lot of lists, and it's very easy for me to tell the difference between a list that was created by someone who had a focus on the user experience of the list versus somebody who just created the list for a functional purpose, and once they had the list there, they didn't really put any extra time or effort into making it a nice place for people to work or interact with. Now some lists, that's fine, they're there just to support a process in the background, but if you have lists where people are going to work with it day in, day out, and actually, there's going to be human eyeballs on it, it's worth taking the time to do go through these steps, consider them, and see what you can implement. So these 10 items have served me very well over time. I always go back to them, whether I'm creating a new list or I'm trying to uplift an existing list. So the first one is going to be column width. Now column width, there's two things we're really looking to pay attention to here. One is going to be the label, and the second is going to be the data that sits within the column. So if we go and have a look at a list here, we can see that our column labels here are truncated, in that depending on the length of the label you give to one of your columns, SharePoint might create it and truncate it. And what I mean by that is just that they chop off the end of it. So you can see here that's happened, right? So I've got what looks to be almost 4 labels about product, but I don't know what the extra bit is, which actually tells me what the column represents. And if someone comes into a list, they're not going to thank you for this, right? Because they don't really know what it represents. They might have to hover over it or something like that. So what we always want to do is we want to make sure that the width of our columns matches the label. So if I hover between two columns here, I can expand the width or contract it if I needed to. So I can see here, this is actually product type. And then we come over here, this is product model, and this is product description. And now, just by making that very small, very quick change, this list is more usable because I can see what the columns represent instantly. Now if you do this, okay, and you extend the width of the columns, you're going to notice a little asterisk up over here in where you can select the views. That means that you've changed something, in our case the width of the column, but it's not saved. So what you want to do is you want to click here and you want to go save view as, don't change the name, and click save. And now we've saved that, okay, so our columns will always be displayed properly. It's a very easy thing to do, but it makes a big difference. So the second thing that we're looking at when we are talking about column width is the data that sits within, and specifically things like multiple line of text columns, okay? Quite often, if your list is created and it's got a truncated or a narrow width, you'll see that the text wraps again and again very quickly. So you only get a couple of words per line, and this is not great to read. Again, the user experience is suffering here. So I would definitely, in cases of multiple line of text columns, expand this out, okay, so it's a lot more readable. It's much easier to read it as a sentence rather than just a couple of words per line that I keep having to drop down with. So very simple, but it's something you definitely want to pay attention to. So again, I'm going to save as because I've got the asterisk there. So that's a nice easy one for us to start with, okay? Number two is more of a principle, and yes, we're using it in SharePoint now, but it's really applicable to any UI design really, and that's going to be, let's try and avoid horizontal scroll whenever we can, okay? So most mice, so this thing, will have a vertical scroll wheel, so it's very easy to go up and down. But to go left and right is a bit more of a pain. You have to find the scroll bar on the bottom of the screen and go to the right. And we want to try and avoid that. And there's lots of different ways we can do that, and we're going to cover them down below. But just as a principle, keep it in your head, okay, that you want to avoid the horizontal scroll. So don't try and throw all your columns into one view. We'll get to that in a few minutes. I'm saying that now because I said before, widen it out to show your multiple line of text columns, give them a bit of width. It's a bit of a dance here, okay? You don't want to widen them too much that you're expanding the horizontal width of your list. So try and avoid it wherever you can. And we'll talk about a couple of ways that we can do that next. So number 3, use lookup columns for reference data. So let's unpack a little bit here. So what do I mean by reference data? Well, we can see here in this list, okay, that we have a hell of a lot of columns or information in here. And the purpose of this list is to track assets within a company. So, laptops, iPads, that kind of stuff. And so one piece of information that we could put in this list would be the vendor. Okay, so if we have an Apple iPad, okay, we have a vendor, the vendor's Apple. So we might capture information about the vendor, such as, well, there is the vendor Apple itself, there's the description, who's the contact for the vendor, the website, the address, their average lead time. So you get the picture. There's lots of information about the vendor. But the primary purpose of this list is to capture information about the asset and the process around the asset. So vendor is really reference data. It's valuable information for sure, but I'm not going to need it all the time. I might need it to reference occasionally. So in that case, we'd use what's called a lookup list. Now, a lookup list in SharePoint is really where you have two lists. You might have your primary list, which is our assets that we're tracking, and we'd have a secondary list, which is going to be all our vendors. And this has lots of benefits. One of the main benefits is that I can maintain the list of vendors and all the information I need to capture about them in a separate list. And then I can use the secondary list to reference within my primary list. Now, it's best to show you with an example. So if we look at another version of this list where I've implemented all the things I'm going to go through, we'll go to asset tracking, okay? So if I come in here, so you'll see that the list has a column called vendor, okay? And what you'll notice is this is actually a clickable link, okay? So when I click that, it's going to take me to my reference list, okay, my secondary list, which gives me all the information about Apple, okay? So the information is there if I need it, but it doesn't have to take up space in my list, which is adding to that horizontal scroll. It's just there if I need it for reference purposes. So what the vendor list actually looks like. So I have a couple additional lists in here. One is called vendors. So I can come in here and I can see I have Apple. I can have a link to the website, who's my contact on Apple, the email, and I can even have more detail in here, such as the description, their lead time, contact information, address, all that good stuff in there. So it's at one click away, and it's not going to bloat my list. So it's really nice to have that there and leverage it so we don't have to shoehorn everything into the one list. So hopefully you're following along with me. And don't worry about the view button and things like that. We're going to get to that there further down in our top 10 list. Another good thing about having this as a lookup list is that consistency. It's much easier to have it baked in to your whole process. So if we came back into our nice looking asset tracking list, I could have Apple in here, okay? And this is a lookup list, so I'm looking up my vendors list. So these will be the options available to me. So if for some reason the vendor changed for this product, I can go and I can view the details of it. And where I have the vendor being Apple, I can come in here, take it out, and what it will do is it'll let me pick the vendors that are in here. So I can always reference a vendor in my list, or I could change it. And if I change any information, say the contact with one of these vendors changed, I could just change it in here and I don't have to edit anything in my primary list, okay? So it's nice like that. It keeps everything nice and consistent, and you're having one area for your reference data that you can always pull into any lists then on your site. So hopefully that's clear enough. Lookup lists are very, very useful, and I definitely encourage you to use them. So I've also created a couple of other reference lists on this site. So one is going to be for the vendors, like I said. Another one is for products, and another one is for cost centers. So like that with a cost center might be a code that you're going to charge for an asset, and a cost center might be linked to a department, and again might have contacts and things like that. Now we can always have them in our list, our kind of ugly looking list, where it's all just shoehorned in here, or again we can have our nice clean list where I could say, okay, that's the cost center, that's the information I need within this list, but if I need to find out more, I could click this cost center and it's going to give me all the information about it. It represents the IT department, Dan is the contact, and you can put in anything else you want in here. So that's your lookup list, okay? Very quick, very simple. There's lots of videos and literature out there on it. I won't go into all the little bits about it. This is more of a principle that you should use them. So again, you have much cleaner lists for the primary task or process that you're working with. So number 4 is going to be limit the amount of columns you're displaying within your views within your list at a given time, okay? You don't need to display everything in here so people always have to scroll to the right to get it. We have the ability to have a details panel for each row where we can get a much more detailed view of what that row represents. So There's lots of different ways people can access this. Again, if we go back to our other list, I could click any of these row titles and it's going to bring me up this panel of all the information. Okay, now when we use our lookup columns, we take some of that out of there so there's not as much noise. So I kind of like to have it so that what I have on the view and my general view is enough for me to identify an item and the key information I'm going to need to quickly access the information. But anything else, while it's important, and yes, it's going to be in this list, I'll have it in a details panel. So it's a click away, but it's a quick click and people can get into it. So if I know that I want to know more about this ID number 0011, I can click view here and it's going to give me the information, our overview, item information, order information, and a link to our invoice. So it's all in here and it's nicely structured and easy to get at. The default way of accessing this is going to be clicking the title, so I can click that and it's going to open up the panel. But what I like to do is really draw attention to it, okay? And sometimes people miss that this is actually a clickable link here that opens it out. So what I typically like to do is add in a button for view details and edit details. It's much more recognizable with different types of lists outside of Microsoft that people work with. There's a clear call to action to say I want to view it or I want to edit it. The way you put it in this, it's very simple. Basically, if we want to add in a view details button, all you're going to do, we'll do it again here. I'm going to say add column, and I just pick a text column for now. And I'm going to say view details 2, right? We don't actually need to put any information into this column, okay? All we need to do is have a column that we can apply some JSON formatting to, and it's going to give us that button. Code is the same every time, so you don't need to know JSON. You're just going to really copy what I'm going to put in here. So I'm going to say save. So now we have this information in here, and what you're going to want to do, specifically what you're going to want to do is follow the link in the description below, which will take you to my blog version of this this video, and you'll have the code there. So when you do go there and you go and copy the code, and it'll be clearly labeled, you won't miss it. What you're going to want to do is go view details, and you're going to go column settings, and then you're going to go format this column, okay? And you're going to go into advanced mode because you're very fancy. And now what you're going to do is remove everything that's here, paste in the exact code that came from my blog, and all you do is click save, okay? And now we get this view button here. And basically what it's saying is when someone clicks this, do the exact same thing that you do as if they clicked the title. What you might want to do is, if I was to look at the information, okay, for any of these items, I'm going to see this view details 2 in here, okay? And I don't want to see it there because I don't want people putting information there because it'll never show up in the list. And it's just tidier to get rid of it. So the way you're going to get rid of that is start from scratch, select any row item, click the little I button here, and what you're going to do is you're going to say edit columns, okay? And I click edit columns, and now I can say don't show this in any of my forms, okay? So I do that, I click save, come out of here, give it a quick refresh for good luck. And now if I go and click here and I go to the information, I'll see that I no longer see view details 2 in here, it's gone. And again, if I go to edit columns, you can see I've also hidden my edit details, view details, and a couple of other columns in here that are calculated that I don't want people to be able to, add their own values into. Simple as that, really. So by doing that, you're adding a bit more to your list and you're showing people there is more to see about this item in here. And you can look at the code, you'll see clearly where I say view, you could change it to view details or more information or anything you want, whatever makes sense. And again, it just makes people really aware that there's more to this row item and they can go in and then they can see it. Pretty simple. So number 5 is, well, we're pointing people at this view details panel, okay? We need to add, or we should add some categorization here, particularly if you do hold a lot of information about your row items. So again, if I go in here and I click view, you'll see here that I've got a structure in here. It's overview, item information, and order information. If we contrast that with just a standard list, if you've not done any of this stuff that I'm telling you about, if I click it, we just have this long list of information, which is a bit of overload, okay? It's hard to really narrow in on what you're looking at, and it's hard to get the logic in there of why things might be grouped together. So in general, if you've got a list of 7 items or more, once you go beyond that point, it gets hard for people to kind of distinguish what they're looking at, and the list becomes a little bit unintuitive to get around. So again, this is all very simple. This is something you could do straight away. So what we need to do to add this categorization is we basically click new, okay? And you're going to see this option over here in the top right. If I click it down, we've got edit columns, configure layout, or customize with power apps, right? Configure layout, that's what we want. So you're going to pick configure layout, and basically we've 3 areas that we can really influence here: the header, which is this area up here, the footer, which is the very bottom, or the body, and that's where our columns are going to be listed. So that's what we want to focus on. So you're going to click body. In here, you're going to paste in basically the format I'm going to show you now, okay? You don't have to worry about adding in all your column labels into the categorization in here. There's a much easier way to do that. All we need to do in this formatting code area is add in our category titles, okay? And again, you're going to go to the link in the description, which takes you to the blog on this topic, and you're going to copy the code that I have there exactly, okay? So I'm going to paste it in now, but the way it's broken up is that we've got these sections in here. So you can see it here where it says sections, okay? And we've got overview, item information, order information. If you look at this, you'll start to see the pattern, okay? Let me zoom in here a little bit so you can see it a bit better. So you'll start to see the pattern, okay? So we have basically between this bracket here and the one down here with the comma, okay, this in here, that's a section. So we need that for every section we have, okay? So you can see it repeats then. I've got the bracket again, and we come down to the comma, the bracket again, and we don't have a comma here because we don't have another section. But if I wanted to add in another one, I'd add in a comma here, and I basically just grab this, copy it, paste it in, remove the final comma, and then we could say this is our extra category, for example. I'm just showing you this in case, you know, you mightn't need 3 categories, you might need less, or you might need more. You'll just get the idea now. If you look at the JSON list formatting examples that Microsoft give you, they will typically show a list of all the columns that belong in a category listed here. And that's fine, you can add it in, follow that 100%. It can just get a bit tricky if you've named your columns with spaces and things like that, because SharePoint's going to add in little code to make up for the space, and sometimes you can put in the wrong label basically. So to avoid that, don't bother putting in any labels, any column labels I should say. Just put in like this and click save. Okay, so refresh the page for good luck, because SharePoint takes a while to catch on to itself. So when we do that, okay, now if we click on an item in here, you see that we have these categories, right? But we've no columns in them. All our columns appear after them, and that's fine. That's what we want, right? Because now we can go in here to this option again, and we can go edit columns, okay? And now all we do is we drag the columns we want into the areas we want them in, okay? So I'll add them in like this, just for demonstration. Obviously there's no real rhyme or reason that I'm adding these ones in here. So we put them in there, and I can click save. And again, SharePoint's a little bit slow on the uptake, so I'll refresh, click this again, and now I start to see that the columns I put into the categories are actually in the categories, which is perfect, right? That's what we want. It's these little bits of attention to detail, the extra steps that 99% of people don't take, that if you take, it really adds to the usability of your lists. And you can see here that if you did have a list that, you know, needed 50 columns in it, just doing this step alone, adding the categorization, is going to really help people use your list. So I highly recommend it. And again, always come into the edit columns once you've done that, and you can add stuff in, take stuff out, remove it from the form, all that kind of stuff. It's all there handy to do, and you can do this today. And if you have a list that's in place, okay, we're not interfering with the data in your list at all. We are just looking at the structure of the forms around your list, and everything in here is reversible, so you don't have to worry about ruining a list. It's fairly safe to come in here and try this out. Try it out on a demo list first to get your confidence up, but do give it a go. Okay, so number 6, don't create a comments column. Okay, I see it all the time. If we come right over here to the list, typically you'll have someone who puts in a column that's comments, multiple line of text, whatever it is, and then people will use their own convention for adding in comments. So they might put their name and the date, and then they'll put in their comment, and then the next person will have their own convention, and it can get quite messy. And you'll end up looking through version history to see when the comment was left, who actually left it, all that kind of stuff, okay? This gets messy, in my opinion. And you know, I was guilty of this in the past as well. I hold my hands up to it, but I've since learned, and now you have too. For comments on a list item, use the comment feature that comes with it, okay? A lot of people don't, and I don't know why. Well, once they're made aware of it, I don't know why you wouldn't. But basically, if I click on any list item, I have a section over here called comments, and I can just put in a comment saying, this is awesome. And then I will just post my comment. And now I have my comment in here and it's saved. So we can have a list item, and in the case of asset management, it might be I've ordered the item, there was an issue with the vendor, they sent me the wrong product, they sent me the wrong color, wrong amount of storage space and anything, right? And then people can go back and forwards on this, and then you'll see a nice threaded commenting history on the item. You can even see up here where it says comments, you can look at all activity, and this will even give you some more activity of the things that happen with the list item. This panel is here, sometimes it's hidden, you might have to click it to come in here, and sometimes the person who owns the list might turn off the commenting feature, and if they do that, there's not a whole lot you can do except ask them nicely to put it back. But 99 times out of 100 it's here. Use it. Don't create your own commenting column, because you'll never be able to get this level of functionality by hacking it with your own homemade commenting column. There you go. Okay, so this next one is the easiest thing, right? You'll literally do this now in 2 seconds, and once you do it, you'll probably do it every single time you create a list. And that's really just to add contrast between the rows. So you can see here, when I hover over any individual row, I get a shading in here, and then I can really focus on what's in the row. But if I'm not hovering over a row, everything can start to blend into each other because it's all just white, 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 white. What you want to do, or what you might want to do, right, is come over here on whatever view you're on, click the drop down arrow and say format current view. So we can format individual columns, change the font and the color and all that kind of stuff, or we can format the entire view itself, okay? So let's format the view. And SharePoint makes this pretty easy for us, right? We get this alternating row styles straight away out of the box. If I click this on, just one click really, click save. Now you'll see that all of my rows, well, they're basically alternating exactly like it said. And this is much easier to scan across a list. Everything is not so blurred into each other. Maybe I need glasses, I don't know. But it's not so blurred. This is much easier. If you want to get really fancy, so I've obviously gone for this beautiful purpley looking theme on my site. I can say format current view, and now I can say edit row styles, and I can click here, and now I can make it, you know, that it's kind of pinky or purpley, and I click save. And now I have this perfectly on brand, super usable alternating backgrounds down my list. So pretty simple. So number 8 is set up the filters pane so it's actually useful, okay? So another piece of functionality in a list that some people aren't aware of, or they just don't find it useful and never go to it, is the filters pane. And it's over here in this obscure little icon. If I click it, I get these filters in here, okay? And you can see I have, what, 1, 2, 3, 4 filters in here, but I've plenty of different columns, okay? So it's not really out of the box set up the way I'd like it set up. So you want to address that, okay? And the handiest way I find to do it is I will pretty much say remove everything from here. So there's 3 dots beside each of them. So I'm going to say remove, I'm going to say remove, I'm going to say remove, and I'm going to say remove. But now that we have that clear, right, so our filters pane is blank, nothing in here. Now I can go in and say, right, what do I want to filter on, okay? So I'll pick my column strategically, right? So status, I'm going to say column settings, and I'm going to say pin to filters pane. And now that's there, okay? Perfect, that's a good usable filter. And then I'll just keep going down the list, okay? Assigning, yeah, I'll probably want to filter by that at some stage. So again, I say pin to filters pane. And now that's in there. And I'll just carry on down the list. But anyway, you get the idea. You add them all in like that. So column settings, pin to filters pane, and they'll come in here. And they'll come in here in the order that they are in your list, okay? So you just start to build up your filters pane. And so that way, when people come in here, when they click the filters icon, and you're going to tell them about it, right? Because it's super useful now. They'll be able to come in here and really quickly say, right, in service, brilliant, assigned to Dan, perfect, and show me the laptops. And very quickly they can narrow down this whole list, which might have thousands of items in it, to something that is a lot more usable, and they can quickly narrow in what they're looking for. So filters pane, clean it up and use it. Number 9, create views for specific tasks, okay, within your list. So generally you have all items in your list, okay? And that's kind of like the catch-all, right? So I tend to think of that as people have come to the list, they want to see what's in it, and it's very generic. It just lets people identify the items, click into them if they see more. But you might have use cases where there's a specific set of filtering, grouping, sorting applied to the list. And if you were to add it in every time, it would be a pain in the you know what. So what you'd like to do is save a set of filters, sorting or grouping, so that it's at a click away from you, so for common tasks. So if we come back into our list over here, the nice looking one, we have the all items view. Okay, now this is great. This is for the average person who comes in here, quickly identify the different items. But I can come in here and now I have one called by year and by month, and I click that once and basically it's sorted, or it's grouped this list, first of all assets by year, and then when I go into the year, it's grouped them by month. Okay, and that's a nice thing, right? So someone can come in here, a very specific task, if they're in here, to look at all of the assets ordered, received, placed, whatever it may be, on a month by month or month by year basis. That's in here. Or they could go back to the all items view and they get this. So basically, try figure out what are the common tasks people are carrying out within your list. Discuss it with them and see, well, you know, what filters do you apply, or how could we make this easier for you, or quicker or more efficient for you? Because again, the whole principle and idea here is just to make it more usable and functional for people. So you might have to stick on your BA hat and talk to them and see how it works, but you can work together. And then in creating these views, that also helps with not having to throw everything into the one view like we had in the not so good looking list, because we weren't leveraging views. If we leverage our views, our lookup columns, all of that kind of thing, we can start to have our list so that we don't have to have them overly wide with a lot of horizontal scroll. And things like this, we could narrow down this column here again, everything to save us every pixel of horizontal space, so we avoid that scroll whenever possible. So it just starts to be much more usable that way. So if you want to create a view of your own, start off with all items, and then what you're going to want to do is click the down arrow. I'm going to say save view as, and I'm going to call this one Dan's new view. You'll probably pick something that is a little more identifiable to the task it represents. But now we have a copy of all items called Dan's new view, and now I can start showing or hiding columns. Handy way to do that. Click any column, go to column settings, go to show or hide columns, and these are all of the columns that we could display in our list. So you can tick them on, tick them off to match whatever your use case is. And then what you can do is you can filter, you can group, you can sort, and then just when you've done that, you'll see the little asterisk up here. You just click save view as, don't change the name, click save, and you're done. Now you have a new view that's primed and ready to go whenever you need it. But anyway, yes, use views. It's a very good way to facilitate targeted use cases within your list. Number 10 is simply do anything you can, right, to make your list more engaging, and not just a typical out-of-the-box SharePoint list that people are sick with and don't like the look of. You see things like Notion and things like that where they try and make it more usable, and people often say, you know, why can't SharePoint be more like that? Well, really it can, and some simple things. So if we look at this list, right, we can add things like emojis, right, into our column labels, right, and it might help with identifying a column or recognizing a column a bit quicker. It adds a bit of color to your list. It just adds a little bit of something extra. It's the kind of fluffy stuff that I actually put a lot of thought into, because I think it makes a difference. So if you wanted to do that, what I'd say is create your columns without emojis first, right? Because when you first create the column, that's the name SharePoint knows the column by, okay? And then when you add emoji afterwards, SharePoint doesn't care. You can have it looking as nice as you want with as many emojis as you want. If you want to add your emoji after you've created your column, just go to column settings, go to edit, and then just add in whatever you want in here. You can right click and get your and add emoji. Can't remember exactly what it is on a Windows PC, but on a Mac it's Control, Command and Spacebar, and it'll pull you up this screen and you can add in whatever you want. It looks kind of nice in my opinion. Other things like the title of the item in your list, the key identifier, I suppose, for the items in here. On a standard list, it can get missed, right? It doesn't really stand out. Sometimes I like to put it in here and format it. So you can go to your column, you can go column settings, and you can say format this column. and just say manage rules, and then you're basically editing the default. And I click more styles, and then you can make it bold, add the text color. Just a note that if you do format the title, it's not going to be clickable anymore, but not to worry, because we create this cool little view details button here, so that will give the same functionality. So you're okay, and anyone can always just double click a row and that'll bring up the view details panel. You can decide whether or not you want to do that. I tend to do it sometimes if I really want things to stand out. So yeah, make your lists look pretty, okay? Do anything you can. Add the nice colored shading to alternate rows, add in your emojis, format the columns that you think it makes sense to do, and you're away in a hack. So that's it. That's my top 10 list of things you can do to a SharePoint list, and it'll work in Microsoft lists as well. It's the same thing, okay? To really help with the user experience, and hopefully you agree, okay? I've used this many times. You mightn't use them all at the one time, okay? But you will certainly find a use for multiple in any given list. And whenever I've done it, the feedback has always been great. People have always enjoyed using the list a bit more once that little bit of attention has been paid to the usability of the list. So I hope you found that useful. I hope you can use that information. If you have anything you'd like to add, put it in the comments below. Please like and subscribe if you would. It really helps with the channel. And like I always say, it gives me that bit of motivation to keep going and create the videos. So until next time, see ya.